Welcome to today's webinar presented by SuperCoder.com. SuperCoder.com is an online coding solution offering Part A and B coding reference tools, resources, and not more than 30 specialty coding and compliance newsletters from the Coding Institute in one site. I hope you enjoy this short session.
We're going to take questions at the end, and I want to be sure that everybody knows if you have a question on a particular slide number, take a note of what the slide number is so we can quickly all turn back to that slide reference. My slide number 2 is a disclaimer slide reminding us that the information is only as good as it was when the lecture was put together, but also to remind me to say, if you hear something today that causes you pause, that causes you to think that you might want to change the way you do something, do not change the way you do it just because Jill said so. Please do the research, make sure that you heard me correctly, make sure I said it correctly, make sure the policy is in effect for the services as you think the change needs to be made, so that the change that you're making is not because of a speaker, but rather because the rules are directing you to make that change. And that's so important because the rules change so quickly. So what is apnea? I mean, we're going to talk about sleep disorders. We're going to talk a lot about apnea. But what is apnea? And as we see on slide number 3, Medicare policy gives us a definition that talks about it being a cessation of airflow for a particular amount of time. Hypopnea, which we also see reference to a great deal in our policy, is an abnormal respiratory event that lasts at least 10 seconds, and it has this reduction in all these medical terms, but basically it is like a mini apnea, if you will. So as we look at the problems that we have in billing, coding, and documentation of sleep studies, we're kind of going to use the last word first and look at the documentation. Documentation of the intake is the start of everything, and proper recording of the intake of the physician order, whether it is for the quote-unquote consult or new patient visit that you're doing in the office, or the intake for the sleep study, it's got to be done right. It may seem like a no-brainer to intake information, but not doing it correctly can lead to some major compliance issues. So be sure that the intake person, your receptionist, your scheduler, whoever it is, understands the rules that we're going to talk about, but also the ramifications of not following them, not doing them correctly, so that they don't make simple mistakes that turn into major problems for you. What kind of studies does your lab do? Well, most labs do sleep studies and MSLTs, and most labs have a protocol for doing a split-night study. Now, if you're intaking orders for a sleep study and your lab has a protocol for a split night, that is a higher level code. It actually pays a little bit more. And so the question is, if you don't intake an order that includes a split night study, then the intaking order only says to do a polysomnogram, to do a simple study. And if you do a higher level study, that's inappropriate because you weren't ordered to do it. So you can have a simple statement like polysomnogram with a split night study if indicated per protocol. That is an appropriate intake of an order. Now, when doing an MSLT, remember most protocols have that the patient is going to have a baseline nighttime sleep study first. And so we want to make sure that that is included in the order for MSLT to make it perfectly clear that they're going to be doing a baseline sleep study the night before the MSLT. And we're going to talk a little bit more about MSLTs later. So what does Medicare cover? We talk about Medicare because Medicare has a lot of the best printed material that we have, but also it's a lot of our aging population that we see. We see that the Medicare specifically lists the conditions that are covered for sleep studies, but also it has this huge statement that says polysomnogram for chronic insomnia is not covered. You know, we are not going to get paid for doing one for insomnia, even though sometimes the diagnosis that our physicians are coming up with is a type of insomnia caused by the apnea the patient has. So in that instance, we want to be sure that our physicians understand that if they believe the patient has apnea, then that needs to be their diagnosis.
SuperCoder is the fastest growing online reference tool with more than 25,000 subscribers. Call 866-228-9252 to get a free product demo or sign up at SuperCoder.com for a 7-day free trial.